Hello everyone, it's Old Guardian here. In this video I'm going to take a look at the free decks that Hearthstone is offering for new and returning players. So if you are a new player and you're coming to Hearthstone, once you graduate through the apprentice ladder and you move into the main ladder and to bronze rank there, you're going to be presented with choice of a deck. You're being offered a deck from 9 of the classes, from all except for Demon Hunter. And then you would have to somehow decide, okay, which one of these do I pick? And in this video, I'm going to tell you all about how to make that choice. The same applies if you're a returning player. If you have been away from Hearthstone, you haven't logged into the game for more than 4 months, then once you log into the game, you get to choose a deck from these options. But which deck to choose? Let's take a look at all of the decks and see how they fare. At this stage of the standard rotation cycle, there's a standard rotation every spring, when expansions that are 2 years old are moved to only the wild format and out of standard format, and only the newer expansions remain. Therefore, at this point we're getting closer to that rotation. It's also important to think about, okay, what are the important and key cards that are in these decks that are rotating out and which are going to remain in standard. Druid deck, for example, I have to say that this Druid deck is not performing very well right now, so already performance-wise it's not a great choice, and it's also not the best of choice based on the cards it has, because Ysera Unleashed is like it's the powerhouse of this deck, but it's one of those cards that's rotating out of standard in spring, so you have limited time to play with that. Speaker Ghidra is going to stay longer, but Speaker Ghidra is more like a utility legendary. It's not a key card that you build the deck around, it's just something in addition. As for the epic cards, the Guardian Animals Survival of the Fittest, this combination is a newer creation, it's going to stay, but Anubis and Defenders are going to rotate out, so Druid is not a great choice. Then there's the Hunter deck. The Hunter deck is a face hunter, just go face and kill people, and it's fairly effective at what it's doing. This is actually one of the 3 decks here that are being offered that you could, in theory at least, reach Legend without making any changes. However, the Hunter deck doesn't offer you much value in the cards that it has. Dragonbane is the most important card probably in this deck, the strongest card in the deck, and it's one of those cards that's rotating out of standard format in spring, so you will have limited time to play with it. Lawkeeper Polkelt was recently nerfed, and it's simply not that great anymore, especially in this deck. So overall, you can build a budget face hunter deck that's going to be almost as good as this one. You can do it without getting cards from this deck, and that's probably a stronger path to do that with Hunter and use your free deck choice to do something else, even though performance-wise this Hunter deck is a fine deck. Mage deck is a small spell mage deck based on just generating lots of resources with cards like Mana Cyclone. It's going to give you additional cards from when you play spells. Wand Thief generates cards, lots of card generation, and then also card generation also in the form of these legendaries, neither of which is rotating out, so that's an upside. Astromancer Solarian, shuffle Solarian Prime into your deck. Solarian Prime, once it's drawn and played, it's going to cast random spells. Evocation fills your hand with random mage spells. The main problem with the Mage deck is that the Mage deck isn't very strong. Then the Mana Cyclone, which is your main random spell generation, is going to rotate out of standard in April, or maybe in March. We don't know exactly when the next expansion is coming now. That just doesn't leave you with enough strength, even though you get a couple of decent legendaries that are going to stay in standard format for a while. Then there is Paladin. Paladin is one of the top classes right now, and this Paladin deck, this is just phenomenal. It's a pure Paladin deck. There are more Libram Paladin decks right now in the format, but all of these are based on the Libram cards. That's Librams of Wisdom, Libram of Justice, Libram of Hope, and Lady Liadrin, all of which are going to stay in standard format after the next rotation, all of which form the core to pretty much any Paladin deck that you can imagine right now, pure Paladin or otherwise, and just great. Also the other legendary Hyves Allura, also another new card, very strong card, going to stay in standard format. Then you even get some stuff like Shotbot, which is from Galagon's Awakening Adventure, so it's really difficult to get, even though it's a common card. It's going to rotate out of standard format in spring, but it's good right now, and this is just great performance, great value. This is by far the best deck, from all perspectives considered. If you just enjoy this kind of playstyle, then this is wonderful pick. The Priest deck is a control deck, there are not a lot of control decks here, and as far as control decks go, it's kind of okay. Right now Warrior is the only good control deck in the meta, so Priest's performance is mediocre at best. But this kind of offers you some value. Mindflayer cards and Warriors on the Infinite are old cards, they are going to rotate out of standard in spring. Soul Mirror is going to stay. Also Zetek Veilweaver, Cabal Acolytes from the epic cards, they are also going to stay. So some of the power of this deck is going to remain, some of it is going away, but its performance level right now is quite mediocre. If you insist on playing a control deck, then yeah, this is a decent choice. But other than that, I wouldn't really choose this one. The Rogue deck is an interesting one. This sort of weapon rogue is not seeing a lot of play in the meta right now. People are more focused on those secrets, early Edwins, building up huge questing adventures. And this one's a little bit more straightforward, hitting you in the face style. Stealth minions, card draw based on around those. Self-sharpening sword, a little bit of weapon power there. Couple of great legendaries and fairly new legendaries in this one. Dr. Creston to buff up your weapons, and Jandy Sparrow, just an immensely great tempo play on turn 5. Both of them are also dual class legendaries. You can play Creston on Rogue and Warrior, and you can play Jandys in Rogue and Mage. So a lot of value. Also the epics are all new. Secret Passage, Greyheart Sage, Steel Dancer. This is a good deck. It's not quite as good as Paladin, but it's almost as good as that one. And it has a lot of valuable pieces. This is also a really good choice if you prefer this more aggressive style. Shaman is perhaps the most played class in the game right now, but those Shaman decks are Evolved Shamans, and they are based on the other Shaman epic weapon, not this splitting axe that you can see here, but the Boxspine Knuckles. So this one, it's losing Vecina and splitting axe into rotation. This is a totem shaman based on summoning totems, making copies of them, buffing them, but some of the key parts of doing that are going to go away in the rotation, and also Evolved Shaman right now is just better. It's also pretty cheap to build, it only requires a couple of epic cards to build it, so I can't really recommend this Shaman deck. It has Instructor Fireheart, which is a newer legendary, it's a decent legendary, but it's really not core in any of the Shaman decks. It's used quite a lot, but it's more of a utility card. So while the Shaman deck is kind of okay-ish, then I really can't recommend this one. Warlock has been having a hard time in Madness at the Darkmoon Faire, and this deck isn't making life any easier. It's a 2 Warlock, fairly aggressive style. Build around Diseased Vulture, which is an old card. It is going to be rotating out of standard format in spring. It also has Kenretide Ebonlock, some Demon Synergies and Flesh Giants, which are newer cards. But overall, just the power level of this deck is too low to succeed in the current meta, and it doesn't have a lot of valuable pieces either, so I really can't recommend it. The Warrior deck in this selection is a pure aggro deck. Warrior is the only really viable control class at the moment, but it's not being offered any control tools from the free deck. It's just pure aggro. Ankhar is a wonderful card, but it's an old card. It's going to be rotating out of standard in spring. Captain Greenskin is an evergreen card. It's from Classic set, and Dr. Krastin, we already saw that in the Rogue deck as well. It's a fairly decent legendary. So there is some value in this deck, but it's a fairly unique style of warrior. All the other warrior decks, there are lots of different warrior decks, but they're all much more controlish than this one, and therefore they don't share any of the cards with this one either, or hardly any of cards. So there's no real good reason to pick this one. It doesn't have the performance level to justify picking it, and you can't really branch out into other warrior archetypes from this one either. So, to recap all of this, performance-wise, there are 3 decks here that statistics are telling me can reach Legend. Those would be Paladin, Rogue, and Hunter. Roughly in that order, Paladin is the strongest one, then the Rogue, and then the Hunter. Priest and Shaman are a little weaker. You might be able to somehow squeeze into Legend with those. It might be a little bit tough, but they might be okay. But then when you look at the value of the individual cards that you're getting, so that you can get stuff into your collection, Paladin and Rogue are far superior to everything else. Paladin overall is the safest choice due to such a great selection, although only for that one class. Rogue, a little bit weaker, a little bit less steady, although it does give you a couple of dual class legendaries, so you can branch out into other classes more easily from Rogue, so Rogue is still a fine choice. Paladin is like a mid-range deck, Rogue is an aggro deck. Then If you really want to play control, then the only option here is Priest, and Priest is playable, even though it's not great. So primarily I would recommend choosing between Paladin for mid-range gameplay or Rogue for aggro gameplay, and those are the strongest free decks that are being offered right now. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the show, please click the like button and subscribe to my channel for more.